Hello everybody, and today I'm going to be talking about mob farms. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about some mistakes that people make when building their mob farms. So by mob farm, I mean hostile mob farm. If you're building a passive mob farm, I trust you know what you're doing. But a mob farm is basically where it's a contraption that spawns mobs and then kills them for you, and then gathers their loot. So if you want, say, a bunch of bones, or a bunch of rotten flesh for whatever reason, then you build a mob farm. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So the first mistake is not lighting up the area properly, or spawn-proofing the area properly. And by spawn-proofing, I mean basically stopping mobs from spawning outside of your mob farm. So some people like to build their mob farms in the sky, and the reason is that there's a sphere around the player, so I'm just going to activate it. So the player would be, this is like if I was right about here, so the sphere is completely around me. If I just go to free cam, you can see this is the sphere, and there's me in the middle there somewhere. But basically, this shows that anywhere inside the sphere, mobs can persist. So outside, if a mob spawns, it will despawn, or mobs will despawn if they're outside of this sphere. So inside of the sphere, however, mobs will be able to spawn. So if you build your mob farm up high, then that's a benefit because the sphere won't actually touch as much of the ground, if any. So if I just go into the mini HUD config, and if I set the sphere here, you can see now the area that's actually inside the sphere is way smaller. Like before, it used to be way out here, but now since I'm higher up, the sphere is only covering this little bit, and that means I only have to spawn proof this little bit. Now the reason you have to spawn proof is because there's something called a mob cap, so only 70 mobs can exist at one time. If more than 70 hostile mobs, unnamed or whatever, if they exist, then the hostile mob spawning algorithm will stop and it won't spawn any mobs until you kill the mobs you already have. This, of course, number can be increased. If you have multiple people, then for each person it's going to be 70 mob cap, but they have to be far away, so if they're in the same spot, it's not going to count. Okay, but what I mean by spawn proofing is basically making the area unspawnable for other mobs, so that the only places mobs can be is in your mob farm. Now, the most common way is probably lighting up the area, and this is because you only have to place a torch every couple blocks. This has its downsides. For one thing, if you're low enough down, then there can be slimes in caves, and they're not affected by the light level, so they could still spawn and count towards the mob cap. Another common way is just making the spawning spaces unspawnable by placing blocks there, so either slabs, buttons, any kind of redstone, or using water, which water is just, it's nice because it covers a large area, but it's also a really big pain in the backside to carry around with you because water buckets don't stack. And the third way that people will usually spawn-proof stuff is making a perimeter, and this is probably my favorite way because it just ensures that there's no spawning spaces around you. You can build your mob farm as low as you want then because you have a big hole cleared out, and it just looks cool. So that's my preferred way of spawn-proofing an area, but this is how you can do it. Sometimes people just build a mob farm like down low in the world, but then they just plop themselves here and they don't spawn proof the caves or anything, they don't spawn proof any of the surface, and stuff like this, like see here in caves a bunch of mobs were spawning, so these would clog up the mob cap and not make the mob farm as efficient. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on to the next mistake. Okay, so the next mistake is thinking that just because you build a mob farm low means it's going to be efficient. And I'm not talking about mob cap limitations or whatever, this is just purely based on the spawning spaces. So if you have a really good mob farm design, then if you build it low, you shouldn't automatically think that it's going to be very much efficient because you build it low. And the reason is because oftentimes people don't actually clear above the area around them. So let's assume that you spawn-proof the area completely. There's no other places for mobs to spawn except in your cave. So we're not limited by that. We're only limited by how fast you can actually spawn the mobs in your mob farm. So we want to make the spawn rates as high as possible, and the way people usually do that is by building it down low. The problem is that the way the spawning algorithm works is it chooses a random spot to try to spawn a mob between the lowest point in the world, so y0, and the highest block in a certain x and z value. So if it's a try to start the spawning algorithm here at this x and z value, so 159, -78, then it will try to choose a random block between all the way down to y0 and all the way up there. And that means that the chances of actually getting a mob inside of your mob farm, if you don't clear above the area, is very low. Now, obviously, the way to get around that is to clear the area above you away from any blocks that are not air. So air is the only block that doesn't count towards because air doesn't count, but every other block, so no matter if it's transparent, non-spawnable, whatever, it's gonna count. So think about it this way. So this is as if your whole country entered into a lottery, because there's so many places, there's so many y values to spawn. Again, all the way from y0 to whatever that is, like probably y60 something. Yeah, y64. So there's 64 people entering into the lottery here, so you can think of it as the whole country entered into the lottery. And here, think of it as like only your family entered into the lottery. So there's a much higher chance of you actually winning something with a small population. So this is essentially just an analogy for why this actually works. But again, if you want to make a mob farm more efficient, just clear out the blocks above it. It's not that much effort usually. Okay, but without further ado, let's get on to the next mistake. Alright, so the third mistake is just building a box around your mob farm. So I've seen this on a couple people's channels, that they just, I think it was a witch farm, they made a witch farm, and then instead of putting like a proper roof around it, like, you know, going out here with the slabs, they just put a box, like, just a box, like, seriously. And this actually hurts the rates quite a bit, so let me show you something real quick. So I want to demonstrate something known as pack spawning. So pack spawning is basically the concept that instead of spawning one mob in Minecraft, it always spawns, or tries to spawn, a pack of 4 mobs, for most mobs. So in this case, we're talking about witches, creepers, zombies, skeletons. They all follow the same thing. There are just some exceptions, but most of the time it's 4. So like, let's say this is where the mob spawning algorithm started, right? Next, it tries to go out a bit. It doesn't matter exactly where, it just goes randomly, and then tries to spawn another mob. And then maybe it goes over here, tries to spawn one there, that works. Maybe it tries to spawn one here, that actually doesn't work because it's spawned in the air, so that fails. And it never goes down, it always stays at the same y value. This is going to be important. So let's say this is y level 70. So let's say there's a creeper that tries to spawn here. So this is, it won't actually be able to spawn, but let's just say it's going to try to spawn there, right? So let's say right over here maybe it tries to pack spawn. That's also not going to work. Let's say it's going to try to pack spawn over here. Again, not going to work because it's in the air. Now let's say it tries to pack spawn into here. That works, and what's interesting is that even though none of these actually properly spawned in, because they're all in invalid spawning locations, this is a transparent block, and these two are spawning in air, this one actually does spawn because it's inside a valid spawning location. So what's the problem with building a box? Well, let's say, let me undo the tick freeze. So let's say it tries to do the same sequence again, but with a little bit of a change. So this time, let's say, yeah, it goes like that. It goes there, but this time it tries to spawn a mob right here. Right here. Inside of solid blocks, because there are solid blocks here. So there are solid blocks here, you can see that it's inside them. It actually aborts this whole spawning attempt, and it won't try to spawn anymore. It won't try to spawn anymore anyway this time, but let's say that happened on the second try. It won't try to spawn anymore, and anything that may have landed inside the farm won't be counted. So the reason that you don't want to put solid blocks here at feet level is that it actually blocks those spawning attempts, and this is harmful because then the extra spawning attempts from the outside won't influence it as much, because a bunch of them are getting blocked by getting placed right in here. Now, what's so bad about not having a roof? So let's say we completely removed this, or we completely replaced it with some blocks that aren't solid blocks, so they don't block the spawning attempts. but they're still not transparent, so they don't let light through. So for example, like redstone blocks, I'm pretty sure this doesn't count as a solid block per se, so it won't actually stop the spawning attempts, but it blocks light. So what's so bad about that and not just going out here with a proper roof? Well, the reason is that here we actually could start the spawning attempt here, right? Because there were blocks here, and I told you it starts spawning attempts at one block above the highest block in a certain x and z value. So like here, this is the highest block, it can still spawn stuff here, or try to spawn stuff again. But over here, the highest block is here, so it can try to spawn a mob like right here. And for this grass block, it could try to spawn a mob right there because there's grass there. But it won't be able to actually spawn at the same Y value as up here, meaning that we actually won't catch spawning attempts from the outside. Now, making a roof out here allows this block here, or literally any block around here that's at this Y value, to be eligible for spawning, meaning that we can actually start spawning attempts and make stuff jump inside our farm. So that's why I want to build a proper roof to decrease the light level, not just build a box. Now, one more thing I want to mention about the roofs is that there's a way to make them even more efficient, and that's using stairs. It's a bit more tedious to place, so this, I don't know, it can increase the efficiency by a little bit if you're building, for example, a witch farm, but still, in my opinion, it's worth it. Just, like, why not? But the reason this is way more efficient is because here, you could see that it was up here, and remember I told you about the highest block? So like it starts spawning attempts, like it could try to spawn something right there. Anywhere from there to Y0 it could try to spawn stuff, but here the highest block, or one block above the highest block, is right there. So it has a bit less blocks to choose from, meaning that we have a higher chance of actually starting a spawning attempt out here and having a jump into here. So this is a way to increase the efficiency of those roofs, just build down a bit, so that they don't have as many Y values to possibly start spawning mobs in. But anyway, just build any sort of roof, just come on, it doesn't take that much effort, like maybe 15 minutes to half an hour for a good witch farm roof. But anyway, yeah, that's gonna be it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you found this video informative, or if you found something that helped you make your mob farm more efficient, please make sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more stuff like this, make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.